Hi, this is Marta with Classes for Teens. Let's get started today with operations with integers and order of operations review from Prealgebra. I would like to encourage you to use your calculator as a tool for checking your answers. I think it's good to use your brain to figure them out and then to check them with a calculator, unless they get kind of tricky, and then use your calculator. It is the 21st century. You don't want to rely too heavily on the calculator because when you get to algebra and they throw in variables, you may not be permitted to use a calculator that is able to manage variables. So you have to understand the concepts of arithmetic, which is what we'll be going over today with integers in order of operation. So on this very first example, we have a positive 15 and a negative 5. I kind of think of this as like piling up dirt and digging holes, right? We pile up a dirt that's 15 units, feet or square meters or feet or meters or whatever tall, and then we take off 5 of them. So that's going to give us 10. Also, you probably learned a rule for this earlier, and when these have different signs, you take the difference of them. So you take 15 minus 10, 15 minus 5, and then you take the sign of the one that had a larger absolute value, so the one that looks larger. So there we go. All right, so this next one, this is like dig down 3 feet, dig down 10 feet, right? Or somebody owes you 3 and they owe you 10 more, so they owe you negative 13. Negative 13 is the depth of a hole, right? So when you have the same sign, they're both negatives, you add them together and keep it the same. All right, that's what we did. And let's look at the next one. Here we have a negative and a positive. And so we want to see how far apart they are. 13 minus 9 is 4. And then we make the 4 be the sign of the one that had the larger absolute value. This one looks bigger, right? So the answer needs to be negative. So it's like you dig down 13 and then you fill it up 9. That means you're still below the ground by 4, right? Again, grab your calculator and check these. To check this on my calculator, I use the TI-36X Pro. I think it's a great calculator, and it's often permitted even when graphing calculators aren't. So we're going to do a negative 13. This is the negative. I don't want the subtract, but I want the other negative button. Usually it's down near the equal. Negative 13 plus 9, enter negative 4. Okay, so feel free to check yourself, but do it in your head. Negative and positive 16. So you build up 16 and you cut down 16. So that gives you 0. You end up at 0 there. Okay, let's continue down this page. Subtracting. And you know, subtracting is like adding the opposite. So it's really, you want to get away from this, but I want to review the concept. This is like adding a negative 11, which kind of puts us back to where we were there. Or you build up 5 and then you dig down 11, which gives you to negative 6. Okay. And here we dig down 2 and we dig down 13 more. That negative is hard to see. It didn't type very large. I regret that. That's going to be a hole that's negative 15. So we add them when they have the same signs. And that's like a negative 2 plus a negative 13 if you want to rewrite it. But again, kind of get away from that and start doing stuff in your head and checking it on your calculator, okay? You'll have plenty of opportunity in algebra to show work. Now here we have subtracting a negative. And this is worth reminding everyone that subtracting a negative, not digging down, right, is going up, right? It's not a negative, so it's a positive. So we add those together and we get 22. Feel free to check all these on your calculator as you go if you need to. All right, so I'm going to rewrite this one just to play it safe. I have a negative 7, and I'm not subtracting 4, I'm adding 4. That's going to give me a negative 3. All is well. Okay. Moving on down the page. Now we're doing multiplying. What you have to remember about multiplying things that have positives and negatives is if you have 2 positives, it stays positive. If you have 2 negatives multiplied, it becomes positive. Negative times negative is positive. But if one of them is negative and one of them is positive, that makes it negative. Okay, and you should have learned that in your pre-algebra, so review that if you need to. Positive times negative is negative. 5 times 3 is 15. Okay, All right. Here I'm going to take this in clumps. I'm going to do these two first. And I would do this in my head, but I'm just trying to show you some work here. Negative times negative is going to give me a positive. 2 times 3 is going to be a 6. So when I multiply those two together, it gives me a positive 6. Then I still have to multiply it by the negative 7. Positive times negative is negative. 6 times 7 is 42. Okay? And I do think you need to get these multiplication facts down to where you just know them right off. You'll be impressing your teachers that way. Okay. And you will not take so long to do your homework. How many 4s go into 24? 6. Now, we have a negative divided by a positive. When we have one of each, it makes it negative, right? All right. And now at the very end here, we have a negative divided by a negative, which is going to be a positive. We don't write a positive. It's not wrong if you put that, but it's not necessary. 15 divided by 3 is 5, and it's a positive 5. So that's all we have to have there. Let's move up to the first one here. This is talking about the order of operation. And you may have learned something called PEDMAS, which is sort of silly. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. I think it's sort of important to think of it in this order. You have one by itself, then one by itself, and then these two go together. This tells us the order that we do things. And there's some nice videos on this on YouTube if you want to listen to one, and maybe even some songs to learn, I don't know. P means parentheses. So the first thing you do is you go to the innermost parentheses and you work your way out of them, following this order of operation. You have to do the same order or we get different answers, and if we get different answers, it's a problem, right? So this was decided a long time ago, and we have to do the order that everyone does. E stands for exponents. So if there are any exponents, you're going to do those first. Then you're going to multiply and divide. Now, you don't multiply first and then divide. You work from left to right, and anytime you get a multiply or a divide, you do it. Then the last thing you would do is go from left to right doing your addition and subtraction. Okay? So let's practice it with this example problem here. And there are more of these in the homework that I've provided at the bottom. So remember, this lecture note is at the bottom and the homework is listed, including the answers. Notice I have a bracket, a parentheses, and another parentheses. So I have two sets of parentheses, and you go to the innermost parentheses. So in this case, the innermost parentheses is this part here, and we decide what to do in there first. Well, there's only one thing to do, it's add. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So I copy down the rest carefully, especially if you're prone to, we're going to put a littler parentheses because I'm going to go ahead and work that part. If you're prone to making copying mistakes, be careful. Go ahead and add that. 4 plus 5 is 9, okay? Now I still have an innermost parentheses because I have these two parentheses inside the bracket. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply that. So I'm going to have 3 plus 8 times 9 is 72. Check yourself if you have any trouble with these. Now, inside the parentheses, all there's left to do is add. So I'm going to do that now. And then I'm going to multiply 2 times. Things that are jammed together, they mean to multiply. They don't write it, they just jam it together, and you're supposed to know that. So 2 75s is 150. There's my final answer. Notice I worked down in a neat and systematic way. When you have a problem that has multiple steps and your teacher isn't asking you just to type it in on your calculator, you need to show these steps or some of the steps getting there. Don't do it all in your head, even if you could do it, okay? Just practice writing it down. Okay, this one actually is a little harder. That parentheses isn't doing anything. It's just sort of faking us out, right? So we could just recopy it without those. I think I'm just going to ignore it and start with the next step. Next step is, are there any exponents? No, there are no exponents, so next step. Now I multiply and I divide. Remember at the top, I multiply and I divide, and I do it as I work from left to right, but don't do any adding or subtracting yet. So don't do this. Now, these two are multiplied. I'm going to do that. And these two are divided. So visually kind of breaking those up. Multiply those and I get 6. Put the plus because we're not subtracting and we're not adding. So when I came to those, I just copied those down. I only did multiplying and dividing. Then I take 140 and divide it by 10. Check yourself if you have mistakes or need to check. Now we're going to work from the left to the right. And I'm going to, just for the sake of not making a mistake, this is going to be 91 minus 6 is 85, right? I'll just do it like that since I'm going to try to do it in my head. And then I add those and that gives me 99. There we go. All right, so I'm going to circle my answer. That speeds the teacher up because if they just check the answer and it looks like you've got the right work, a lot of times they don't go through, all the steps, okay? But that isn't to say that you should backfill and fake them out and use your calculator. That wouldn't be good. So, especially on problems this easy. Here this negative is not really doing anything either except just sticking with the 13 so that you don't think that we want you to subtract or something. So there are actually some better problems on the homework that I didn't put here, so make sure you do those homework practice problems and check your answers. So no exponents here. I'm sort of disappointed. I may have to grab me another problem before I cut this video off today. So I'm going to multiply and I'm going to divide, and let's just do it. I'm going to grab my calculator over on the side and just actually multiply 14 times 3, and I get 42. And then I have 182 divided by 13. I'm doing that on my calculator, and it gives me 14. But since I have a positive divided by a negative, the 14 is going to be a negative because positive and negative make a negative. So now I have 80 minus this minus this. 80 minus 42 minus 14. And I'm using my calculator just to speed me up here, and I'm getting a 24, okay? I'm going to see if I can grab a quick review question for us out of my little algebra book here that has a little bit more, I don't know, I'm probably in this book going to get into fractions. If you have any questions, I will try to clear those up, maybe in the comments, or you can go to my website. Remember, here's my website, Classes for Teens, and there's a contact Marta, and if you contact me, I will be happy to answer your questions, okay? All right, see you later for algebra, pre-algebra review number 3.